Hello people, today we're going to talk about Operation Sindoor, what it was, the domestic and international response, and something much bigger than all of this. On 6th May 2025, just a couple days ago, the Indian Air Force conducted a 23-minute targeted operation hitting multiple terror launch pads across the line of control, sites allegedly linked to the Pahalgam massacre. Now, this wasn't just a border skirmish. It was a deep penetration strike into Pakistani occupied territory, executed with high precision and very publicly acknowledged afterwards. The name Sindoor isn't just theatrics, it is deliberate. It represents sacrifice, blood, and symbolism tied closely to the national identity. India has in recent years become more intentional in how it names its military actions. This one has carried its weight. According to what's being circulated through Indian defense sources, the targets were not random. They were chosen after intensive intel gathering, satellite surveillance, and multi-agency coordination. This included locations long linked to cross-border terrorism, and no civilian casualties have been officially confirmed by the Indian side. The strikes were said to be timed to minimize non-combatant presence and with the primary objective being the dismantling of infrastructure used by groups like Jaish-e-Mohammed and Lashkar-e-Taiba. The immediate response from Pakistan? Outrage. That's expected. But it is interesting how quickly they shifted from denial, nothing happened, to condemnation, this is an act of war, and then to victimhood, you hit our civilians. They claim India hit a mosque, that there were civilian casualties, that 5 Indian jets were shot down. Now the thing is, this pattern of response isn't new. We have seen it during Balkot, during Uri, and even back in Kargil. Deny, deflect, dramatize. But this time there is a bit more desperation in the air because these weren't just surgical strikes on the border. This was a deep, very visible violation of their claimed sovereignty. So the fear is, if India can do this without facing blowback once, what's stopping them from doing this again? Pakistan's military establishment, which thrives on projecting strength, suddenly looks, well, vulnerable. And that's where things get dangerous, because wounded pride often reacts before it thinks. And now here's where things get even more complicated. Because while India says the operation was clean, surgical, civilian-free, Pakistan's putting out photos, videos, and statements painting a completely different story. And let's be honest, both sides are spinning narratives. Propaganda isn't new, and in wars of perception, truth is often the first casualty. On one hand, Indian officials have been very clear. This was a precise intelligence-backed strike on terrorist infrastructure. No civilians were targeted, no collateral damage. That's the official line. But on the other hand, Pakistani channels have lit up with images and videos claiming mosque damage, civilian deaths, and Indian aggression. Now, it's not about blindly believing one side or the other, it's about knowing the game. This is a post-truth battlefield where the story you tell often matters more than what actually happened. And when both India and Pakistan have used this space before to either amplify or downplay losses. But the difference lies in accountability. India at least has released its version of events with clarity, naming targets, specifying the nature of the operation, and taking diplomatic ownership. Pakistan, meanwhile, seems to be caught in a familiar spiral, first denying anything happened, then claiming exaggerated damages, and finally calling for international intervention. The international community, as usual, is doing the diplomatic dance. We urge restraint, we're monitoring the situation, both nations must exercise caution. It's all very predictable. But behind closed doors, you can bet there are serious conversations happening in Washington, Beijing, and Moscow. Nobody wants a South Asian conflict right now, especially between two nuclear-armed neighbors. This is just the perfect time to put this out there. Let us not romanticize this. Military strikes, no matter how surgical, always have consequences. We're not playing Call of Duty out here. There are real lives on the ground, and even if India did everything by the book, precision does not mean perfection. Because no matter how justified a retaliatory strike might be, war, real war, is never neat. It doesn't just stay on the battlefields, it spills over into homes, onto economies, into the lives of people who had nothing to do with the decision making in the first place. If a full scale conflict were to break out between India and Pakistan, the consequences would be catastrophic, not just for both the nations but for the entire region. We have seen this story before. In every major war in modern history, it's not just the soldiers who suffer, it's the civilians, the poor, the displaced, the people who die not from the bullets, but from the ripple effects. Famine, economic collapse, medical shortages, and total infrastructural breakdown. And in today's geopolitics, no war stays bilateral for long. The United States, for example, has a long history of intervening, whether directly for strategic control or indirectly through alliances. Other nations would follow. What begins as a sharp, targeted operation could spiral into an uncontrollable multi nation conflict. The idea of a localized border skirmish escalating into something global isn't just hypothetical, it's been the pattern of every great war before us. So, yes, India's response to terror has to be decisive, and yes, there is nothing noble about tolerating repeated provocations, but calling for war, trending hashtags, media chest thumping, populist one liners is not just irresponsible, it's dangerous. A war might rally emotions, but it devastates lives. It makes currency worthless, it leaves generations trying to rebuild what one political impulse shattered in days. So we need to be careful, deliberate, and measured. A strong state responds to threats, yes, but a wise state also knows when restraint is power. That said, it's still important to push back, not just militarily, but against the propaganda machines that seek to rewrite the truth in real time. It's important to push back against the narrative being spread for damage control. There are claims flying around from Pakistani media and official sources. Some say 26 civilians dead, others say mosques destroyed. But where is the verification? Where are the independent confirmations? There's also a broader point to be made here about how military success is defined today. It's not about who struck harder or faster, it's about who controlled the narrative, who shaped public perception both domestically and internationally, who kept their house calm, and who stirred panic in theirs. So, as viewers, as citizens, as people who care about what's happening beyond the headline, we've got to be skeptical, not cynical. Ask for evidence, look for patterns, and don't let memes and primetime noise replace actual analysis. So, what does Operation Sindoor really mean? Is it just about revenge for Pahalgam? No, it's a shift in posture. It's India saying we're done playing reactive, we're taking the fight across the borders and not in the shadows. But the bigger question is, where does this stop? Because this can't become the new normal. Precision today can become escalation tomorrow. And if both sides are locked in an endless loop of retaliation, it's not just borders that burn, it's trust, dialogue, and diplomacy. At the end of the day, we're not just talking about two governments with conflicting interests. We're talking about millions of lives shaped by decisions made in closed rooms. And that's why it becomes even more important to see beyond the surface level narrative. Because while soldiers carry out operations and governments make declarations, it's often the common citizen who pays the price, either through silence, fear, or grief. This isn't about picking sides. It's about acknowledging that multiple truths can coexist, that a country can defend itself bravely and justifiably and still recognize the dangerous tightrope it's walking. India has made it clear that Operation Sindoor was designed to be surgical and restrained, targeting only terrorist camps, not civilians. But what follows is equally crucial. It's now a war of narratives, of global perception of whose version of the truth takes hold. And in this battle, we need to be vigilant, not just with borders, but with information. Because in a moment like this, it's easy to cheer, it's harder to pause, to ask the uncomfortable questions, to hold space for the grief that preceded this operation and the caution that must follow it. So, yes, this was a message, a loud, clear, and unmistakable message. But maybe the most powerful message of all will be how we handle what comes next. With clarity, with conviction, and above all, with conscience. And with that, we have come to the end of this video. I would love to hear your thoughts, so feel free to drop a comment below and let's discuss. This moment is definitely a significant one, both for the nation and the larger geopolitical landscape. Anyhow, until next time, yours truly,